Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Milburn, editor of the MSP Channel Insights portfolio, and today I'm joined by Gavin from Glean. So to start, could you be free to introduce yourself, your role at Glean, and what you're kind of focusing on at the moment?
I will do. Thanks, Sophie. I'm Gavin. I am the field CTO here at Glean. We run most of the pre-sales operations at Glean. So we take customers' requirements around work AI, search agents, translate them into business outcomes, tangible value, and then deploy Glean for our customers.
Fantastic. And there's so much change happening with AI at the moment, trying to kind of go from that exploratory phase to really fully implementing things. So what gap in enterprise AI adoption is the Agent Development Lifecycle designed to sort of solve, and why is that needed now more than ever?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, what we're finding is that the gap isn't really interest in agents themselves, Sophie. It's more like just a lack of the gaps and the lack of discipline around how agents are built, and perhaps too much sprawl going on with agent development. And there is a gap in how customers can manage that sprawl, how they can connect maybe disconnected pilots that they have running right now into some kind of consistent approach. And also there's a gap on ROI. So what measurement do I get around this deployment of whatever AI solution I'm talking about, particularly in the last couple of weeks with a lot of the narrative going around totally maxing and some of the surprises that financial controllers and CFOs are getting in customers around the cost of inference that are out there. So so Glean is trying to address that sprawl and the lack of governance in the products that are out there, based upon improving how agents are built and developed in the enterprise.
Brilliant. You've definitely touched on my next question, but I'll ask it anyway so we can go maybe a little bit deeper into that. Would be where are enterprises most commonly kind of getting stuck at the moment when trying to move from that initial stage into full production at scale?
Um, these agents are very information and data hungry, so they can get stuck, Sophie, around giving the right context to the agents, the right data sources, the right skills, the procedural skills they need to be giving highly qualified and highly effective answers to users. Um, Governance, as I mentioned, I mean, how do we control who can create the agents, how much the agent will cost per run, and finally, value. So it's great having a science experiment AI project going with an agent that's doing some cool stuff for sales or marketing or customer support or whatever it might be. But tangibly, what does that mean? I've got a nice, cool project going with an agent, but who's benefiting? Where is the ROI? And again, just going back to the cost of inference in the last number of weeks being quite topical, there's not a greater focus on quantifying the value of an agent before you start looking at an expansion to the wider employee base and our customers.
And it is just finding that balance, isn't it, of trying to innovate and trying to experiment, but also, yeah, like you said, with all those things with governance and security and everything. So where would you say you find that balance, and what, I guess, tips would you have for CIOs trying to find that balance there?
Yeah, and particularly given that all this stuff can demo very well. So it tends to create kind
Yeah.
of pressure on people to make decisions maybe before that value has been quantified. In terms of things I would say to a CIO, very often they're in the world of treating kind of speed and governance as trade-offs. That's the world they live in. But we'd like to kind of think, well, maybe if you create guardrails for AI within your company, that should help you to kind of scale it, because then people have more confidence in what you're deploying once you publish the guardrails about what AI can and can't do based on policy that you allow. I think that can generally help, because speed and governance are kind of scary topics for end users, but kind of guardrails should generally help people to consume more and to use it more. I'd also say that explaining how you to all your users who can build agents.
Mm.
How do you manage the cost? How do you share the workload? What is the approval process for getting an agent published? Really important that you don't give agent building power, Sophie, to every employee in the company, because that creates the sprawl. It creates a lack of confidence in the output of the agents, because everyone's agent is run a little bit differently. And the second thing is you need to have a consistent front door for agents. There's so many agent building platforms out there right now. Glean would like that to be obviously Glean as being that front door, but I mean, having a consistent place where everybody goes to build an agent would be a really great start.
Yeah, and I'd love to dig a bit deeper into Glean's a part of all of this, of how Glean actually helps organizations measure whether AI agents are delivering real business value beyond just those initial kind of gains.
Well, it's kind of more it's yeah. I mean, it is topical. Actually, just recently we announced a feature called the Agent Development Lifecycle, where we're going to help customers understand across, you know, a number of phases of how to understand how an agent will be used, how it will be measured, not
Mhm.
just at the end of the evaluation period, Sophie, but also over time. Agents, of course, will change and evolve. So how do we ensure we create a structure and a life cycle per agent that emulates what software developers have been doing for years? You know, even any building an RFI or an RFP, there's always a process with that. But I think agents have kind of lacked that. So what Glean has built has been better agent insight in terms of the products. So you can see by team who's using an agent, how many agent runs there are, try to attach some quantified metrics to that agent. So what's it delivering from a value perspective? But the bigger point is again, it's we want to enable customers with Glean using this agent development lifecycle framework, so to say, to understand how to launch agents, how to observe how they behave in the wild, how we refine them and improve them, not just based upon a static requirement at the start of that agent building, but how people are actually consuming it and using it. So again, as the old saying goes, an agent is for life, not just for Christmas, you know.
I haven't heard that one, but I like that. And then I guess without giving away the full roadmap of what's to come, but what are you looking forward to with Glean, and what do you kind of do you have any predictions for where AI agents are going to go in the next couple of years?
Well, we kind of see obviously the token maxing being super important.
Mm,
Glean's perspective on that is by ensuring you optimize the context layer from your internal data sources before you start talking to inference down the road. That can optimize the queries you ask of your large language model because you're actually showing or refining the search results before you start asking your LLMs to summarize. That should reduce the token consumption and ultimately help your large language models and your MCP and your agents get a better sense of what answer the individual is looking for, rather than what can happen quite often, Sophie, is that with many federated kind of approaches, the MCP tooling they're looking for the right answer. But if you give better context up front to those MCP tools and the other LLMs, the quality of the response is better and there's less traffic and chat back and forth, which again can result in increased token consumption. We think organizations that treat agents as part of a life cycle that have a clear understanding of governance, clear understanding of measurement with the ones that lead, and simply not just deploying agents because it's the latest kind of sex and sizzling industry. So having a really strategic view on what agents are meant to do. We think that companies that treat the data they have internally, the assets they have, or the context I mentioned earlier, as a potential differentiator and not just a place where you can run reports and dashboards, but also how can I turn that data through the agents into a way that the business gets definable value will be winners. And conversely, the companies that lag behind, Sophie, will be the one that ignore the sprawl, that let those agents run amok in the enterprise. They have multiple tools. They don't have a governance model, disconnected experiments,
yeah.
lack of consistency. Agent building becomes very subjective. So one team is better at building agents than other teams. So the net is there's lack of clarity across the entire enterprise in what agents are delivering. And I think by extension will dilute the value of AI as a workload.
Yeah, and I can imagine it's so easy to get caught up in the next new shiny thing and just implement it quickly. But like you said in the beginning, those guardrails are super, super important.
It is. I mean, we try and avoid science experiments with many of these conversations. So when customers come looking for, low to mid-level teams looking for agents, we try and elevate it to, who at the senior level cares about what we're doing. It's finding that and also understanding what is the pain, right? I mean, ultimately, when you and I go shopping for whatever it might be, we're looking to solve some kind of pain. And when you find the pain, usually what emerges is the person responsible at an executive level for paying for that pain to be resolved. And that's a lot of what we have to do to ensure we don't do science experiments because they just, generally speaking, lack that the critical mass to take enterprises wall to wall.
Yeah, I just imagine it's such a difficult balance to find because you then don't want to be the person that kind of falls behind everything as well. So yeah, I just don't know how you even start to find that balance. But
Yeah, and you're right. And especially when you're doing an agent proof of concept with customers,
mm,
there's so much happening. Like a proof of concept might last 6 to 8 weeks. But in that 6 to 8 weeks, I mean, I've been around for a bit too long, some would say. So much can happen in that 6 to 8 weeks external to what you're doing, like new LLMs, new pricing, new panic, IPOs. There's just so much going on, and it just tends to distract the project team from perhaps what they were looking to achieve at the outset. So we have to be kind of super clear going into it that no matter what happens in the ecosystem, we have a North Star of proving X, Y, and Z.
yeah, especially like you said, since everything's changing so quickly. But I feel like I could talk to you about this all day, but I won't take up any more of your time. So thank you so much for your time for the interview.